It's Louisville, Kentucky. We're on a beautiful rooftop terrace. There's maybe 70, 80 business leaders there. Cigars are going, the rare bourbon's poured. It's the kind of evening where the conversations get real without anyone deciding that they should. And at some point in the night, one of our guests steps up onto a chair. Nobody asked him to do this. This wasn't on our agenda. The evening was already flowing well. The kind of momentum where the right call is to usually just let it be. So when someone gets up on the chair uninvited, deep down, I'm sitting there worried, like, what would it do to the rest of the night? Is it going to kill this momentum we've got? But something about the moment made me stay quiet and let it kind of unfold. The second Troy Duhan opened his mouth, the entire energy on that rooftop changed. Over the next 5 minutes, everyone went completely still. Some of them were literally crying before he'd finished. Others were kind of holding back. I had to turn away for a moment just to pull myself together. And I say that as someone, I don't feel like I'm easily pulled, although here or later in life, some people would argue. But 30 plus years in business, that 5 minutes sits a category on its own. What happened on that rooftop and everything that followed from it is the clearest picture that I have of something that I want to put in front of you today. There are two things being built inside your business happening simultaneously. The first one, you got the P&L, the team, the operational machine, the equity you're accumulating. You're probably tracking that closely, or at least you should. The second one is being built whether you're tracking it or not. Your reputation, the standard your organization operates at when you're not in the building. The reason someone who genuinely knows you would stand up in a room and say something about you that stops people cold. The leaders who build something that actually lasts, that generates returns beyond their direct involvement and attracts the kind of people and opportunities money alone can't manufacture, they're building both intentionally. And today, I want to show you exactly what that looks like and what it produces. Welcome to Business, Bourbon, and Cigars. I'm your host, Scott Joseph. 3 decades of building, acquiring, and being in close proximity to leaders at every level has given me a very specific view of what separates the ones who build something genuinely lasting from the ones who build something impressive. The gap between those two, I repeat this often, it's not strategy. It's not execution. It's something about the operating standard the leader holds when nobody's watching and nothing's immediately at stake. That standard is what produces the kind of moment that I watched on that rooftop. And it's completely buildable. That's what today's going to be about. So give you a little background. Troy Duhan owns Premier Automotive Group. But the reason Arnold Gasita called me specifically to ask if Troy could be part of our retreat had nothing to do with automotive. It was because of Giving Hope, the foundation that Troy had built around feeding families, constructing orphanages around the globe for children in need, and restoring, dignity to people who genuinely been forgotten by everyone else. Arnold, God, I remember this like it was yesterday. He had just come back from Brazil, where he was there with Troy. They were helping build one of those orphanages. And when he calls me, there was a weight in his voice that I recognized as something, we'll say, well past enthusiasm. He goes, Scott, I think this group should hear this story. So we had it on the agenda. I planned to give Troy a few minutes on stage the final morning. That way it could be clean. It was organized. It fits the agenda. But that's not what happened. That night on the rooftop, no microphone, no plan. Troy steps onto that chair and he starts talking about his father, about legacy, about what it actually means to make an impact that outlasts the transaction. Then he described the trip to Brazil and, what it looked like to walk into an orphanage that existed because a group of people in the business world decided to show up for something beyond their own bottom line. You could literally feel the group lean in. I mean, everybody was all in on this. And the way people lean in when someone is saying something true rather than something polished. And then, completely unprompted, Troy shifts to my dad. And Troy and my dad had known each other since the 90s. They're both part of a Toyota 20 group when I was just starting J&L marketing. My dad was a general manager at Green Tree Toyota. Troy owned his own stores, at that time a Toyota store. They respected each other's, before I'd built anything worth talking about, which is what made what came next kind of land the way it did it. Troy started sharing things my father had said about me, things I had never heard before. The kind of things a father apparently says to peers, right? Openly, honestly, in a way he doesn't always say directly to his son. They were very kind words. But I remember hearing those words, and in that setting, from someone my father trusted, I had to turn away. Not from sadness. It was more like the weight of something arriving before you fully understand what it is. It was one of those moments that kind of just hit me before my brain had a chance to catch up to it. When Troy finished, rooftop was silent. People were crying who I would not have predicted would cry. And then the conversation resumes, right? But it was different. It was quieter, like the room had been reminded of something it knew, but almost been moving too fast to feel, if that makes any sense. So I remember later that year, Arnold invited me to the Giving Hope Gala in New Orleans. And I walk in, I immediately recognize 7 Me Plus Ultra members. Troy, Arnold, Dean Powery, Chuck Kramer, Brady Schmidt, Jorge Gomez, myself. The same people who had been stopped on that rooftop were now in the same room again. And this time showing up for something that had nothing to do with their own business interest. That doesn't happen by accident. That's what occurs when the work a person does and the way they do it creates a gravity strong enough that the right people stay in orbit long after any individual transaction is finished. I want you to remember this. Revenue tells you how well your business performed this quarter. Legacy tells you why it was worth building at all. The leaders who figure out how to build both simultaneously, they're the ones who create something that genuinely compounds. So it's 4 things: specific, operational, not abstract, that the leaders who build this kind of lasting impact actually do differently. They decide what their name is going to mean before the market decides for them. This sounds philosophical until you make it practical. Your reputation is being shaped right now by a specific set of decisions. How you handle, a difficult client conversation, whether you protect a team member in a moment that costs you something, the standard you hold to publicly versus the one that you slip on when it's inconvenient. Those decisions accumulate. Over time, they produce a reputation that either opens doors or it closes them. And this shows up quietly, whether it's in your hiring, maybe your partnerships, and the caliber of clients who seek you out versus the ones that you have to go chase. The leaders who build something lasting, they don't leave that accumulation to chance. They get specific earlier than feels necessary, about what they want the pattern of their decisions to say about them. A practical place to start. Ask yourself what you'd want someone who has worked closely with you for 5 years to say about you. Not your results, but your operating standard. Then ask whether the decisions that you made last week support that description or quietly contradict it. Most leaders who do this honestly, they find a shorter gap, than they feared, and a more specific gap than they expected. That specific gap is where the real work is. They invest in relationships that have no visible return, and they do it consistently. Troy didn't build Giving Hope as a strategy. Arnold didn't go to Brazil because it was good for Petra Automotive products. 7 Me Plus Ultra members didn't show up at that gala because, there was a business case for it. They showed up because of who they decided to be. And that decision, made repeatedly over years, produce a quality of relationship that is genuinely different from, what transactional investment builds. The return isn't invisible. It's just delayed and indirect. It shows up as the phone call, from someone, maybe you helped them 3 years ago, who now wants to bring you into something significant. It shows up as the referral that comes from a relationship that you invested in long before that person was in a position to send you anything. It shows up as the person who stands on a chair at your event and tells the room something about you that changes the temperature of the night. Operationally, this means protecting time and energy for relationships with no immediate ROI. Not most of your time, a portion of it. Enough that the people around you understand that you're not only showing up when something is on the table. That consistency over years is what builds the kind of trust that money literally can't replicate. They build their business to reflect a standard they hold to even if the exit never comes.
Right now, you're juggling every decision, putting out fires, and trying to grow your business on your own. Every day feels like a grind, and no matter how hard you push, the breakthrough you've been chasing seems like it's just out of reach. You don't have the right perspective, or maybe the network to see the opportunities waiting for you. The Business, Bourbon, and Cigars Leadership Retreat is your chance to change that. Imagine being in a room with entrepreneurs who have already overcome the challenges you're facing, leaders who have scaled, innovated, and found the clarity you're searching for. Through our mastermind style sessions, you're going to gain actionable strategies and the opportunity to connect with active Me Plus Ultra members. These aren't just networking contacts. They are entrepreneurs who think strategically, spot opportunity quickly, and can provide insights that accelerate your growth. This experience allows you to see firsthand how high-level leaders solve problems, create momentum, and unlock opportunities. So you can leave the retreat not just with a plan, but with a network that expands your possibilities faster than you ever thought possible. The first 5 people to apply at meplusultra.com/BBC50 is going to receive 50% off their ticket. Don't wait. Secure your spot now and step into a space where real business breakthroughs happen.
There's a version of business building that's entirely exit-oriented, or focused, right? Every decision filtered through how it affects the eventual transaction. I'm not saying that's wrong, but when the exit number is the only story, it tends to strip out the things that make a business worth, more than its financials. I'm talking about the people who stay because they believe in what's being built, not just because the comp is competitive. Your clients who refer without being asked because the experience was specific enough that sharing it felt obvious. The culture that holds its standard under pressure because the leader built it that way from the beginning, not because a transaction was approaching. It's funny. Troy's businesses are financially, serious. He didn't build giving hope instead of building a strong operation. He built both. And the character that made one possible is exactly what made the other credible. When you operate at a standard that you hold to regardless of the outcome, the business that results tends to be worth significantly more when the transaction does come. The exit number and the legacy, they're not in competition. They reinforce each other. They let the people around them see what they actually care about. In my opinion, this is one most leaders underestimate. Your team, your partners, your clients. They're watching what you do with the moments that don't have an obvious business payoff. The way you respond when something goes wrong and nobody's going to find out. Whether you acknowledge what someone did well in a setting where it didn't benefit you to notice. How you handle a relationship that stopped being useful without becoming transactional about the exit. Those moments signal what you actually value. And people, talented people, specifically, they make decisions about where they invest their best energy based on those signals. They want to work inside something that stands for something. When the leader's operating standard makes that clear, consistently and without posturing, it attracts a quality of people and commitment that changes what the whole organization is capable of producing. Remember this, the culture you build isn't what you announce in a company meeting. It's what your best people observe in the moments when you didn't think anyone was paying attention. 7 people, who were stopped by 5 minutes on a rooftop in Louisville ended up in the same room in New Orleans months later. This time choosing to be there for something that had nothing to do with their bottom lines. That's not a story about generosity. It's a story about what a certain kind of operating standard produces over time, when you stay consistent with it long enough. My dad built that over decades of decisions that probably felt ordinary in the moment. He wasn't running some type of legacy strategy. He was just operating a certain way over and over until it became unmistakable enough that someone who knew him wanted to stand up in a room and describe it. That's available to you. The business you're building right now is accumulating a second story alongside the financial one. The question we're sitting with is whether you're building that second story with the same intentionality that you bring to your P&L. And if not, what specifically you'd want to change about it. It's not a small question, and it doesn't require a big event or a dramatic pivot to answer. It usually starts with one decision made differently, for a reason that has nothing to do with this quarter's numbers. The conversations that happen at our business, bourbon, and cigars leadership retreats, they're the honest version of what I described today. Not the performance, not the curated highlights. Operators who've built something real, willing to talk about, what that actually required, what they're still working on, and what they want the next chapter to look like. Some of the most significant relationships in my business life started at these retreats. Troy was there. Arnold was there. The people who showed up at that gala were there. It's not coincidence. It's what happens when you put the right people in the same setting with enough time and enough honesty for something real to form. So our next retreat, it's October 13th through the 15th, 2026 in Louisville, Kentucky. Visit meplusultra.com/BBC50. And that way you can get 50% off your ticket. Spots fill up for a reason. We're deliberate about who gets one. I am Scott Joseph. This is Business Bourbon and Cigars. Cheers, everyone.